This week, I am joined by Matt Alderman to interview Corey Thuen, co-founder of Gravwell, talk about focusing on the basics that sustain us, the pillars of a SOC. It will be one of the themes, and we'll talk about some of those pillars and how best to implement them in your SOC. In our second interview, we welcome Candy Alexander. She is the president of the Information System Security Association, or more popular name for that is ISSA. She'll join us for an interview segment. In the news, lots of really fun news this week. Threat Quotient expands with MITRE ATT&CK framework integration, because if you're a vendor and you're not mentioning MITRE ATT&CK, you're feeling left out. JASK launches a new heads-up display for security operations centers. I mean, that sounds really cool. And some acquisition and funding updates from Guardicore, Auth0, and KnowBe4. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. The Viavi Solutions Observer Platform provides SecOps teams a powerful combination of comprehensive data for threat hunting and incident response that includes wire data analytics and enriched flow records. Using pure, unaltered packet and net flow, Observer presents views across the entire IT infrastructure with threat alert features including scope, impact, and advanced traffic profiling. Teams can use automated workflows to dive into high-fidelity network evidence and more quickly resolve issues, minimizing impact on customers, users, and business operations. Learn more about the Viavi Network Security Solution and download free resources at securityweekly.com/Viavi. That's VIAVI. Is the fear of a cyber attack keeping you up at night? Are you worried that your business isn't properly protected? Keep your network up to date and secure from vulnerabilities with VSA by Kaseya. Kaseya's VSA patch management module installs, deploys, and updates all of your software from a single console. Kaseya's network antivirus provides real-time updates and ensures maximum security. Start sleeping peacefully all night long. To watch VSA in action, request a demo today by visiting securityweekly.com/Kaseya. That's KASEYA. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys, your employees, contractors, and privileged users. 60% of online attacks are carried out by insiders. To stop these insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observe It enables security teams to detect risky user activity, investigate incidents in minutes, and effectively respond. Get your free trial at observeit.com/securityweekly.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 138 of Enterprise Security Weekly. It is May 22nd, 2019. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, joined by Matt Alderman, just off with the airplane yesterday from Barcelona. How's it going, Matt?
Buenos dias.
Was it fun?
It was a great event. We had a really beautiful day on Monday there. Kind of rained when I got there, but Monday was great. Good event. Got to hang out with the SysDig folks for a bit. We had a good time.
So you were smart. You left the country and avoided the germs. All 5 of us now are sick here in the office, including my wife, who I think was patient 0. But
yeah, and considering I'm leaving this weekend for Italy for vacation for my 25th wedding anniversary, me being sick would be really bad.
It would be really bad, yes. We're muddling through it as I stumble through some of the announcements because trying to focus on not coughing or sneezing. Make sure you register for our upcoming webcast with SaltStack, Logarithm, and Domain Tools. securityweekly.com/webcasts. Make sure you register. SaltStack is the next one. And I tell you, I know configuration management sounds like it's going to put you to sleep. I promise that we'll make it exciting. And I also promise that it will be awesome because the number one resource in the world that I know of, at least in configuration management, left Tenable and went to work for SaltStack, which is one of the drivers behind them being a sponsor because of the confidence level that both Matt and I have in Mehul. He's just an awesome person to work with. So if you want to do configuration management, you should look at SaltStack and attend the webinar. They've got an open source version in addition to a commercial version. All righty. Do we have more announcements? Sorry, I paused that one to kind of customize that announcement, and then I got behind. Oh, just Corey's intro. How about that? Hey, Corey Thuen's here with us. He co-founded even Gravwell to enable log management of every data type an organization might need for success. And they have an open source or freemium version, I think is what we called it, Corey, available. And he's here today to talk. I can't talk. It's the cold. I apologize. He is here today to talk about the pillars of a sock, and not the kind you wear on your feet. Corey, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm excited about it.
Yes, it's going to be fun. If you want to learn more, securityweekly.com/Gravwell, GRAVWELL. That's right. Ingest everything. securityweekly.com/Gravwell. And I commend you. I have to say, doing a lot of software engineering recently and dealing with unstructured data or just data of different types and trying to make sense of it is, I end up with a lot of like Python regular expressions that don't make sense to me the next day when I go look at them. Actually, they don't make sense to me when I add them in because I copy and paste them from Stack Overflow. So the fact that you've made sense of all of this data is just amazing to me, Corey.
Yeah, that's the idea. Yeah, we saw because structured stuff is just hard to deploy if you've tried to set up Elk or do some of these things. So we looked at it and said, there's, the competitors in the space are kind of rigid and, sometimes a little abusive to customers. So we wanted to make something that was easily deployed, easily managed so that you can get the data in and ask the questions of it and dynamically explore that. Because like you're in the middle of a software dev project, how often do your logs that you're generating change or slightly tweak or whatever? So if you had to also change your schema related to that on all your different log setups, that's right. Rough.
Now, Corey, we talked about the 3 pillars of a SOC. I'm assuming one of those is like log and event collection, or is that too broad? Or
no, absolutely. That is, and log and application data is one of the big pillars for what you're going to want to collect.
Yeah.
But I thought what you said in the beginning, maybe to derail off the notes immediately, but this is Security Weekly, so
that's right.
Because you said, I liked what you said about change management and how you said, sometimes it puts you to sleep, but I feel like logs and application data as part of the pillar of the SOC also gets that same treatment. It's like the Dr. Shivakin's book. And Marcus Ranum, all the big resources that were put out about this are years old, but it's still one of those things that sort of people aren't doing very well at all still.
Well, yeah, because
which is sort of interesting.
It's kind of like watching a boring kung fu movie, right? Like there could be like 30 minutes of really bad dialogue, and when the movie's dubbed, like you lose a lot of that meaning of the movie, and then after 30 minutes of suffering through all the boring stuff, there's like a fantastic fight scene, right? That wakes you up. Looking at logs is the same thing. You're scrolling through pages and pages, even if it's summarized and correlated, you're scrolling and scrolling and scrolling until you find that one thing that's really interesting.
Right. Yeah. So it's tough. I feel like we need a red hat that says make security boring again.
Right.
A little bit to help people focus on some of those fundamentals.
And Corey, my guess is, look, we focused on kind of network logs first, right? Our firewall logs, maybe our IDS integrations, our network stuff. Then we realized we needed host data. So then we had to go out and figure out how to pull all the host log data. Then we realized, we can't forget about the application because the application's running in this infrastructure. So we need all this application data. So a lot of people, I think, still think about log data a little bit as the old network log data and not all the additional dimensions of log data that you need to really start to correlate and get a better picture of what's going on in the environment.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And the correlation is one of the really big things that we try and enable with data fusion, because it's that correlation that gives you the greater context for how things are going. But that was a really good point, especially considering how we're moving to serverless. So there's less OS logs, there's less network logs, and now it's almost like we're moving exclusively to application logs. And so if you're not doing that kind of logging and collecting out of your Kubernetes or the serverless applications that you're running, then what else do you have?
Right.
Is
So, Corey, I have a question. What are the other two pillars of a SOC? If there's three, we talked about log and defense is one. What are the other two?
Yeah, so the other one is the wire data. So you've got your Bro core lights. I think you guys just had on Matt Cawthorn from Extra Hop.
Yep.
Those types of things where you're doing the anomaly detection, the sensors, the indicator searching on the wire and the actual network flows. And then the other main pillar is the endpoint stuff. Your CrowdStrikes, your Carbon Blacks, your silences, whatever. Monitoring the actual end device.
Similar to my enchanting quadrants, which the fourth one that I throw in there is threat intelligence data as another correlation source, which is used through all those other three pillars, Corey.
Right.
To your point.
So that's where I'll actually fight you a little bit. It does sort of stand on its own as a pillar, because once you've got all those different things, then doing threat intelligence on those as a whole is kind of an important thing. But I would wager that for a good number of organizations, if you did no threat intelligence and you sort of outsource that to the vendors of the other solutions.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, that's a great way of looking at
that stuff. So
Right.
it's sort of a nice to have, I think.
Yeah, to your point, right? Each of those three, whether you're doing log data, you're doing packet data, or you're doing endpoint data, they all have a level of threat intelligence built into them. So you're probably getting highly correlated data anyways. And so why put your own threat intelligence on top of it if you're already getting it from your...
Well, my argument, because then it's not a quadrant, and I can't make the funny joke about the analyst firm that starts with J.
You got the 4 horsemen as well. Yeah, 4 is a nice number for that, but...
Right.
But yeah, I think so. And especially when... I don't know an organization that feels like they have enough security people. So when you're already strapped for people, and you're maybe, if you're not as mature of an organization and you're just figuring this stuff out, then focusing on the threat side, I think, is something that is maybe going a little bit too far. And that's why I want to talk about the basics, or that's sort of a theme that I'm feeling on my own personal level, because you made another joke in the beginning, like if a vendor's not talking about MITRE ATT&CK, then what are they even doing anymore? And so yeah, people use our stuff to threat hunt specific TTPs that they're looking for. But for a lot of organizations, like if you're focusing on that instead of, and then you're not collecting some other, logs, but it is a good framework, because then it helps, it sort of forces you to look at that stuff. Like if you're not doing PowerShell logging, then there's a whole section of the TTP stuff that you're just going to miss, or you're not going to be able to do. So, and
there's a whole class of attackers that you'll miss by not doing that.
Right.
Well, potentially, unless you catch them on the network side. But then I feel like it's almost too late, right?
Yeah, possibly. So, well, that's like, there's still people who aren't centralizing their logs, but if an attacker has a presence on the system, privilege escalation or not, then they can change the logs. So you can't,
it's true.
Like if you're doing incident response and you're having to go to the host after it's been compromised, well, then you're screwed, because you can't trust it anymore. The system has lost trust. For what the state of everything is. So
it was interesting, Corey, when I talk about my enchanting quadrants, right? I'm like, so you're getting this log data, you're getting some network data or intelligence, whether that's packet sniffing or net flow, right? You're getting some endpoint information, whatever capabilities you have there, right? In this case, it's probably log data. And maybe you've got some threat intelligence, and I like your theory of, you could kind of sprinkle that across the other three pillars or quadrants in our example. But then you need a way to make sense of all that and have, I don't want to say single pane of glass, but it'd be nice to have one solution that could take in that data and make it actionable and have a repeatable process for it. And you've got some interesting examples as to how you've helped customers, do that with these various sources.
Right. I think, yes, the single pane of glass has sort of gotten... It by nature, it's like not going to work, because everybody wants to be the most important person, I guess. You sort of need some of these vendors to realize that people aren't going to spend a lot of time in their tool. They might come to their tool in the end, but if you're going to generate an alert because an indicator was seen or something, you need to include, click back information, but people are putting it in Splunk, they're putting it in Gravwell, they're putting it in some other system so that they can actually sort through it, because everybody's dealing with alert fatigue, everybody's dealing with all this different information. And you need the context that comes from collecting and analyzing everything in the environment. And for us, we call that data fusion, and that's what we built out for our analytics pipeline to be able to, you can drop data sources from different things into the pipeline and then analyze them, in parallel, and then merge them together into a single data stream and go from there. So the great example is using DNS, fusing DNS information with network flow information as just a basic thing. You're taking DNS from either your application logs or maybe you're carving out of the wire. The DNS resolutions as they happen are important, because if you're doing an investigation and you have this suspect IP, if you try and resolve it or perform the resolution after the fact, it's not the right information. It's not what the systems were experiencing at the time of the breach or at the time.
It's already changed. I mean, we've seen malware and C2 channels. I mean, they're basically rotating them extremely dynamically. There's a lot more technical detail in there that escapes me at the moment. But in any case, continue.
No, right, exactly. That's the crux of it, right? So all that stuff is changing. It's really dynamic. So you need to know how it was at that time, snapshot of time that this happened. So you've got your DNS logs, and then you fuse that into the pipeline, and then you can use some other threat intelligence stuff to try and create this unified context about what was happening. And that's where you run your analytics and stuff. So historically, like we have one user of our community edition, which is our premium version, I suppose, that they had worked at a large company, and they had worked on a team that spent weeks as a team building this DNS NetFlow example to be able to do this for the single use case.
So all they were trying to accomplish was not like logging an event correlation in a grand sense, but they wanted to be able to correlate a DNS event, such as a query for a particular domain name, right? Or the IP address to domain name relationship, and correlate that with a NetFlow log that said like this person or system had this IP address at this time and did this query, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a little bit of an oversimplification, but yeah, that's essentially what it was.
And they spent more complicated, but they spent weeks trying to develop tools and scripts.
Yep, the weeks doing that, but then with the nice part about our tool and the pipeline analytics is you're piping grep into other modules. It's a lot like sitting on the terminal, or if you've built up pipeline query systems before. So you put that together in the stream, and they had their results out in context within a day instead of weeks, which I thought was really cool.
That's awesome.
It's always cool when you put some software out there and then the community uses it and tells you the story about awesome stuff.
And I love it too when folks like yourselves create software that it could take weeks, right, for a team to develop a solution, but they went and got your tool and they did it in a day. Like, that's awesome, right? That's a huge testimonial. So
gives you a little bit of warm and fuzzies. But yeah, it's exciting. It's the kinds of things that you can do when you have that data exploration and all the data with the single pane, I guess, to use the term. When you've got it all in the same environment and you can search and correlate and do statistical analysis or basic machine learning on stuff, then you can do some really cool things. And if you need to get back down to the underlying sources, you can always do that.
So now you can take the endpoint information in there as well. Because my next logical question was like, look, if there was some kind of event that led to this IP address did this DNS query at this time, that was a malicious domain. Now I want to go back to the host, or better yet, the logs of that host at that time, or artifacts about that host that don't live on the host anymore because I know it's probably compromised. Like you said earlier, Corey, someone could be covering their tracks. What other artifacts can I pull then from the host at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we encourage when we set up. So we don't collect any of that information. We're not trying to be a company that creates those tips for that information, right? We're not sitting on the endpoint. So we rely on the data that people have from all their different endpoint sources. And there's a lot of budget options for this stuff. So if you don't have one of the
in Active Directory, right, you can enable all kinds of different. I mean, there's whole kinds of
and Sysmon is you can get a lot of EDR stuff with Sysmon alone for doing stuff. So so you can monitor which process actually created this network communication that I saw in the network data, and then which DNS entry was it going out to, because logging DNS in Windows stinks. But hey, Mark Rosinovich said that they're adding DNS to Sysmon, so that is awesome. I'm really excited about that.
No, that's really cool. There are and we should state there are bypasses for Sysmon, or ways in which attackers can bypass and or clean up after themselves.
Oh, right. Once it happens, then your data's.
We ran a segment on Paul's Security Weekly. I think it was Carlos talked about Sysmon evasion techniques.
Oh, cool.
So it is out. It is out there, but again, that's always a cat and mouse game, right?
Right. Once an attacker is present on a system, then from that point in time forward, you can't trust what's coming off of that system anymore.
Right.
So, but up until then, that's where you need to be able to go back in time, and that's why time series is so important when you're doing security or logs. And so that was like we had to build our database from scratch for our stuff, which was not enjoyable because there just wasn't a good time series way to store and scale out unstructured data stuff. So. That was a big pain that we didn't like to do, but we did it. And I think it's one of the main reasons why there's not really.
You didn't use blockchain for that?
we should use blockchain.
I'll
confess.
Yeah, go ahead.
In meetings, I throw out blockchain just to upset the rest of the team
every
now and then. I'm like, we should just use blockchain for this. What's the matter, guys? But yeah, I think that's the having to do all that work to create that database, which allows this type of correlation, is kind of. I think that's kind of one of the main reasons that there's not a lot of direct people competing with Splunk, because you can set up like Elastic or do this stuff, but there's it's a fundamentally different approach to the analytics options. So it's tough to solve the same problems. They just solve them in an entirely different way.
Yeah, I agree. The data structures. What I've learned from people who are smarter than me, like yourself, Corey, over the years, is that when you're trying to solve a specific problem and you have a lot of data, right, that there are different strokes for different folks, right? It depends on how you're analyzing that data, how often you need to query that data, how you structure that data, and what it's being used for. And a lot of times people will be surprised about the underlying architecture. Like, oh, you're not using, an elk stack, or using Mongo, you're using a traditional database, a relational database, but it all depends on what your goals are. And it's that structuring of the data that allows you, in this case, to be able to allow analysts to analyze all of that data and make sense of it in a timely fashion, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we set out to do. That was why we built our own data lake. I guess you could use that term possibly. To describe that, because you don't know what you're going to be pouring into the lake. We don't know what the format of these logs is. Syslog, nobody follows specs either, so it's like you got to be able to dump the data in, and then you've got to be able to search through it in a way that's possible. So there's advantages to using like a data warehouse where you've got your data. It fits this box type. It's this color, so I'm going to put it on this shelf. This data is this box. It fits this shelf over here. And then that's a lot easier when you're going to sort of organize things in a worst case scenario. Whereas worst case scenario where you've got a data lake, if we didn't do any sort of indexing other than time on it, you kind of got to dredge the lake to do things. But it's also really nice when you're doing aggregate stuff because if you dredge the lake, then you're already dredging. So you can just aggregate and correlate from all this different stuff, and it's not any more expensive. Whereas it gets a lot more expensive if you're doing that sort of that warehouse approach, to use a simplified analogy for all of the stuff.
But if you think about the traditional SIMs, though, I mean, one of the things that was happening was you were trying to take data and shove it into their format, and you were losing aspects of context when you did that.
Exactly.
Right? That ability to unify the data in a way that allows the context to stay. So by taking the data raw and not forcing it into some pre-described format, you can keep a little more data fidelity in that environment, and then potentially that some of that data and those attributes are now important in another use case you haven't discovered yet. So I like the concept that you bring the data in raw, in whatever form. Then you can decide based on the use case, what's the right packaging for that data that you can now serve back up to the application or to the user.
Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah, and that's crucial for security stuff because attackers break specs, right? So if you don't have that underlying raw data to look at, then you might be out of luck for actually figuring out how an attack worked or whether it was successful or not. But yeah, having that underlying data and being able to ingest first, ask questions later is a big deal.
Yeah. Any use cases around the application side? I'm curious because you made a very good point, and I'm a big believer that we're going to abstract away the network, we're going to abstract away the endpoint. We're already doing it. What's left then is the orchestrator, Kubernetes or Swarm, depending. It's mostly Kubernetes. Then you have the containers that sit on top of that. How are you ingesting that? Any interesting use cases there? Because if we think about containers and the data we can get out of them, it's syscall data, right? It's binds, it's forks, it's process starts, etc. How does that correlate into some of the other things you're doing with the rest of the data?
Yeah, it actually gets tough, and there aren't many people like the logging has to, for a use case of like a business use cases are actually pretty common for people to use our stuff for, and not just security. Business use cases, application DevOps type stuff, where you're monitoring that thing. So people have to build that logging out within the application a lot of the times if it's custom or setup. But then monitoring and getting insight into the container itself is it's going to be an area that we have to start to care more about and figure out how we're going to do that on the security side. Because yeah, it does change. It changes the paradigm a lot, like you're saying, and so things are different. The amount of information that you've got, it's like you know throwing TCP dump on this stuff and grabbing network comms out of it is it just doesn't work the same way.
Right. Yeah, and this is one of the challenges we saw in the early days of containers, and there are solutions now getting access to that data. And now I think it is, how do you integrate some of that data these solutions are getting into something like Gravwell to start thinking about the other correlations to, now we figure out what's happening with the application, because I see external network traffic, but I'm also seeing stuff within the container that's in that same timestamp. Now I can start to really understand how these applications are being used in production.
Right. Yeah. You need all that security stuff to be able to be as lightweight and ephemeral as the serverless stuff. So if you're dropping containers, tearing them down, standing them up, you need to be able to have your logging and your security infrastructure do that as well alongside them. And so I'm excited to see that as an emerging area where we're able to keep up with, because it's an obvious trend of where stuff is going, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. Any closing thoughts for our audience, Corey?
Yeah, we derailed a lot off the main thing, but make security boring again is kind of it's okay to be boring, and I think the people are really important. Enabling your people to do their job is a really key thing, and I hope it's an area of the industry that I think like we've almost swung a little bit too far when it comes to the ML and stuff. Like it was at RSA, there was a booth that was showing off their tool or whatever and the playbooks, and the guy screwed up his demo. But then he said something like, "Oh, here I am acting like a junior analyst going off my playbook instead of like a senior analyst where I know I'm supposed to follow it." And that sort of struck me weird because I was like, well, if you're a senior analyst, like these are the people who've got experience, they see all the different stuff, like they should know their environment better than anybody else. Don't you kind of want them to be able to do the dynamic exploration and threat hunting and go off of your playbooks where necessary and be able to go out there and kick ass? Because they're your ninjas. They're the people that are going to be out there doing the really cool blue team stuff that I think we don't do a good enough job of highlighting. Everybody wants to talk about, red team's just sexier in the media and everything else. So I think we should make security boring, but in doing so, highlight the sexiness of interesting blue team stuff.
Agreed.
So.
Completely agree. Well, Corey, thank you so much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly. Make sure that you visit securityweekly.com/Gravwell. They've got a freemium version that you should check out. With that, we'll take a short break and come back with our next feature interview with Candy Alexander. Did I get that right? From ISSA.